Hey everyone, welcome to another live Q&A. Today we are going to be having on Lauren, aka the dairy dietitian. I think she's on right now, so I'm going to get her on here.
Oh,
Hi.
hi.
Thanks so much for doing this.
Of course.
This is
Trying to
awesome.
little screen.
Yeah, so the whole point, I guess, today was there's so many myths going around. I think for a long time, myths have been going around about dairy, and you do such a great job on your page of combating those myths. And so I get asked questions all the time about certain myths around dairy. So I just figured, hey, why not have somebody whose, specialty is in sort of dairy to come on and sort of clear up some of those myths because I know they've been around a long time, and I just don't even really understand how a lot of them were even started. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, if you just want to get started and just kind of introduce yourself, and then we can get going on we had a ton of people send in some awesome questions, which was great. So
Yeah.
I don't think we'll have any trouble filling up the hour today. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm excited. Thank you for asking me. I mean, this is definitely one of my favorite topics to talk about. I agree with you. There are so many myths. I feel like people are so confused on what they should be doing because everybody says something different. So I'm with you on that, and I'm excited to kind of go over some of those today. But like she said, I mean, my name's Lauren, and AKA Dairy Dietitian. So how I got started, I actually grew up on a dairy farm. I grew up in a small town in Central California, and my heart was actually for animals, and I was dead set on going to vet school. I mean, since I was a little girl, I was going to become a vet, and so I went on to Texas A&M, and I got my degree in animal science. And kind of as I was working through that animal science degree, I started to just encounter a lot of these misperceptions of the agricultural industry and really the food industry as a whole. And I think, growing up in agriculture, I was surrounded by people who were very like-minded, to myself, not saying that everybody is like that, but I would say the general consensus, if you're
yeah.
exposed to it, you maybe understand it better. And when I got into college and I came to a completely different state and was surrounded by completely new people, I felt some of that confusion. And so I switched my focus away from vet school and ended up going on. I completed my degree in animal science and went on and got a master's in clinical nutrition, which the two have actually gone together for me hand in hand. I mean, the animal science degree really gave me an in-depth understanding of animal agriculture and kind of how our food is made. And then I got to go on and learn how to educate people on what that food does for their bodies. So, but my passion has always been
Whoa.
talking
Sorry
about
about that.
agriculture. But yeah, my passion's always been talking about agriculture and just trying to make people, I like to talk about what do foods do for your health? Where does your food come from and what does it do for you? And I think people are so curious. They're so far removed from agriculture, but they want to know. And so it's been
Yeah.
exciting for me. The page has been fun. I started, let's see, the Dairy Dietitian, I started it back in November.
Okay.
I don't know. I think it's gotten a lot of good response. It's been fun, and I've learned
Yeah.
lots about what people think. So
Yeah.
uh, I'm sure I mean, it's an interesting adventure.
Oh yeah, I know. Sometimes you get questions and it's like, man, I don't even know where that myth even originated from because it just makes no sense. So
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sure you get tons of questions like that.
I know.
Yeah, so I guess we'll just get started. I think we had a ton of questions specifically around dairy being inflammatory. I know like that's a huge thing that people just sort of say, and
Mhm.
you ask them to like why they think that, and it's just like, oh, that's just what I've heard. So yeah, if we could just get started with that one.
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. And I didn't mention this, but I'm a registered dietitian. So I work a lot with some of these common diet trends and food fads and whatnot. And I get these questions, and right now the anti-inflammatory diet is, I mean, all the rage. And a lot of anti-inflammatory diets are very heavy in whole grains and fruits and vegetables especially, and that is because a lot of the nutrient compounds that we see in fruits and vegetables. But just a general overview of inflammation. So when we talk about food and inflammation, we're generally talking about very low grade chronic inflammation. And this is inflammation that's associated with a lot of the diseases and conditions that we see in today's population. So your general healthy adult does not walk around in an inflamed state. So I think that is step one to understanding the diet. But when you have conditions like arthritis, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, different conditions like that that are very prevalent, they can result in like a very chronic low-grade inflammation. So anti-inflammatory diets are kind of an easy way to address that, and they introduce in nutrients that combat some of those inflammatory like biomarkers in our body. And so dairy recently has been brought up in a lot of research as an inflammatory focus. And the research is actually super, super exciting. Like, this is probably one of my favorite topics to talk about, because people have long associated dairy with inflammation because it has saturated fat in it. But the language around the saturated fat content in dairy is shifting right now. I mean, there are over 400 different types of fat in dairy. It's the most complex food as far as fat goes. And so most of the research actually points towards dairy either having no effect at all on inflammation or an anti-inflammatory effect. And in a lot of the original studies, they focused on yogurt and postmenopausal women. And they found a positive effect from yogurt and inflammatory biomarkers in these postmenopausal women. But from there, it has expanded. And now it's inclusive of multiple fats, so whole fat, 2%, 1% non-fat, and then also just milk in general. So it's shifted away from just being limited to yogurt. Okay. But yeah, there was one study, it was done in 2017, and it consisted of 52 clinical trials that they looked at, and they found a significant reduction in inflammatory biomarkers throughout this study linked with dairy. So if you have regular consumption of dairy, which I think is exciting. And another great thing, the conditions that I mentioned earlier, dairy has been linked with reducing your chances of developing type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. So that's another pro of dairy and the inflammatory conversation. And when I think about dairy in our diet, dairy actually pairs really well with fruit and vegetables. So things that have already been deemed as anti-inflammatory, and now we have dairy that's been deemed as anti-inflammatory, and you can combine those two to really get more bang for your buck. Think about yogurt and apples, or yogurt and berries, and then you can put cheese on cauliflower, different like that. So I just think it's a really exciting time for dairy. And like I said, anti-inflammatory diets are kind of all the rage right now. And so in place for dairy to fall, because it's shown a lot of really positive research.
So you had kind of mentioned obviously there's different skim milk, 1%, 2% whole milk. I think we got a few questions too about people asking, what's the healthiest? I mean, I know personally, like growing up, I think we drank 2%, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, fat is bad, and then everybody was drinking skim milk. And now everybody is like, oh, whole milk is the most natural, so that one's the best. So is there a best, or is it just they're just different?
Here's my answer. I mean, so the current recommendation from the dietary guidelines for Americans is 3 servings of low-fat or non-fat milk. No fat, no dairy. So I generally make my recommendations close to that advice. However, like I said, the language around whole milk has completely shifted. I mean, the talk about the relationship between saturated fat and the development of cardiovascular disease is changing. And so with that, I tell people, if it is either whole milk or nothing, have whole milk. You know, it absolutely has a place in a healthy diet. And if that is what your taste buds prefer, go for it. You know, to me, the biggest thing is, can you keep it in a calorie controlled diet? You know, whole milk, the difference there is in calories from the fat content, right? So a glass of whole milk has more fat and therefore more calories. And if you are able to make other dietary adjustments so that you stay in a calorie controlled diet, I say pick which one you like and which one your family likes. And
I think another misconception too is that I think a lot of people think whole milk is like a lot more fat than, 1% and 2%, and it's not really like that
no,
much more.
yeah. Yeah, so most people, when they think whole milk, they think, oh my gosh, it's all fat.
Yeah.
It's between 3 and 4%. So generally like 2 to 5% if the fat is in whole milk. So it's the one that's similar to what comes, right out of the cow. So my recommendation is very broad. I kind of just say pick which one. Each milk has 9 essential nutrients. So whatever you pick, you're really just looking at calories and fat. So
so I think in addition to that, we should probably talk about raw milk, because that's sort of having a resurgence now. I actually just wrote, like literally just yesterday, an article for Egg Daily on raw milk and how it's unsafe. But it's just crazy to me how people, it's so much less safe than pasteurized, but there's so many myths around the supposed health benefits. So are there really any benefits to justify drinking raw milk?
There are. The supposed health benefits to me do not outweigh the risks. I mean, they are not supported in science. And I feel like you and I have been really pulled into quite a few of these raw milk conversations recently. I mean, it's definitely caught on. It's a new trend that's coming back. And they claim a variety of supposed health benefits. And I will say the science is not there to support it. It's really not. So, they claim, or a lot of times raw milk advocates claim that it doesn't cause lactose intolerance. They say pasteurized milk does. But at the end of the day, pasteurized milk and raw milk contain the same amount of lactose.
Right.
So if you have an issue with pasteurized milk, you will probably have an issue with raw milk. And, it's the way your body digests the lactose. So, there's that. There's also a claim that it reduces like allergies. But casein, the protein in milk, is heat stable. So pasteurization has not been shown to affect casein. And that's what most people have the allergy to, is casein. So, that claim does not stand on solid ground. But what we do know is that it can be a source of some really, really dangerous bacteria, E. coli, salmonella, listeria, just to name a few. And there have been studies, and I did some reading up kind of after you and I talked about doing this. I did some reading on the bacteria in raw milk, because dairy products are known for being a good source of probiotics, but raw milk does not contain the probiotic bacteria that people claim it does. If you're looking for gut health, if that's your goal for raw milk, I would recommend like a pasteurized yogurt that has active cultures, or kefir, or another fermented beverage that's safe to drink. So you are 150 times more likely to get sick from drinking raw milk. And they have seen the incidence of foodborne illness related to raw milk consumption is 4 times higher now than it was in the 1990s.
Yeah, I just read all that stuff for my article too, but I was just looking into the history of, pasteurization. And it's just crazy to me that, it was like in the 1800s, like 1864, I think, was when they discovered that heating it was killing pathogens. And like literally it was saving like particularly young children and infants' lives. And like fast forward 200 years and people are like, oh, we don't need this. Like, it's just crazy to me.
I think you bring up actually a really good point, because to me, part of the misperception comes from a lack of understanding of what pasteurization is. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes people think that things are added to it, and I understand why they would think that. It's the milk has been processed, therefore
Mm-hmm.
things have been added. But pasteurization, like you said, it's simply the heating and then the cooling of milk, and the purpose
Right.
of it to destroy potentially harmful bacteria and pathogens. And then it also extends shelf life of milk, which is
Right.
milk, one of the most perishable food items out there. And by
Yeah.
going through the pasteurization process, the shelf life is extended to 10 to 14 days, which helps
Right.
us. I don't know.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. That's
it,
actually a good segue into my next question. So, when I've posted about conventional milk versus organic milk, a lot of people have asked me why, typically, when you go to the store and you buy organic, it lasts a lot longer. Like the expiration date is out a lot farther. And that's because they typically ultra pasteurize organic milk, and so that it has a longer shelf life. But anyways, the myth surrounding just specifically, is organic milk uh more healthy than conventional? I get that question a ton too.
yeah. And I think you do such a great job of just reviewing organic just as a whole. And, I'll put it out there just as a disclaimer. I have no issues with organic whatsoever. I
Yep.
think it has its absolute place for people. And some people that I've worked with in the past, they say, oh, I prefer the flavor, or I just prefer those farming methods. But I
Yep.
did have, and I've posted about this before on my page. I once had a patient, and I was talking to them about they needed to make, some dietary adjustments. She wanted to lose some weight, and she told me that she can't afford to eat healthy because she can't buy organic. And I just think that is so unfair to the consumers. Organic has long worn a health halo,
Mm-hmm.
and it's time for that health halo to come off. You
Yep.
know, kind of like you've reviewed on your page, and this refers to everything that's grown organically. Organic refers to the farming method used. It does not refer to the health and the safety of that
Mm-hmm.
food. So, same as with fruits and vegetables, studies have shown that organic milk is not nutritionally superior to conventionally produced milk.
Yep.
One nutrient that is slightly different is omega-3. And I think that a lot of times people will hang their hat on that nutrient. And omega-3 is great. Most dietitians always recommend try to get more omega-3s, but
Mm-hmm.
you'll notice that milk is never the food source that they recommend. And it's for a reason. Milk is not a concentrated source of omega-3. So when organic naturally has slightly higher omega-3, which is due to the food that the cows eat. So they eat more grass generally than
Mm-hmm.
conventionally raised dairy cattle do, but that results in slightly higher omega-3, but it still is far below any other significant food source. So if you're looking
Yeah.
to omega-3, I recommend like salmon or flaxseed or walnuts or something like that. But you can also find milks that are fortified with omega-3.
Mm-hmm.
To me, the question of organic and conventional, it should not be a nutritional debate. Whether
Right.
you buy organic or conventional, anything, you should
Yep.
know food is nutritious and it's safe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Preference and affordability for your family.
Right. Yeah, I think I looked into the study that people always cite for organic having higher omega-3s, and it's like they'll phrase it like it has 62% more, which sounds like a lot, but
Yeah.
when you're talking about such a small amount compared to, like you said, some other sources that, actually are good sources of omega-3, I think if you do the calculation, it's like it would equate to like drinking, like you'd have to drink basically like 5 gallons of it or something crazy like that to
Milk.
get, yeah, to get like as much as like a 4 ounce fillet of salmon or something. So it was
Yeah.
just like, the way that sometimes people, organic proponents, like phrase it, it sounds like it's a lot more, but it's really not. And yeah, you made a great point too. It's not that we're against organic. Like if you like the taste of it, if you like it for whatever reason, like that's fine. Just don't
Yeah.
buy it because you're afraid of conventional, or you think it's healthier when it's really
Yeah.
not. So,
Yeah. Too, I mean, to me, the biggest thing is people saying, oh, you're doing your kids an injustice if you buy conventional. And I know that may be controversial or whatever, but that's not true.
right.
Conventional is nutritious and it's just as safe and it is more affordable for a lot of people. And
Yeah.
I buy conventional,
Yeah.
if it was only organic on the shelf, I would buy organic.
Right. Yep.
Both options. And so,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
I think so. There's a lot of other myths tied to conventional, like, you know, a lot of people think that it's just filled with antibiotics and hormones. So if you could just kind of talk to those specific myths, and they're always specifically, targeted towards conventional, and scaring
yeah,
consumers about conventional.
yeah, yeah. And I can speak to this. I mean, as I mentioned, I mean, I am not a dairy vet, but
Hmm.
I can speak to kind of some of the regulations that go on. There are no antibiotics in milk, whether it is organic or conventional. There are layers and layers and layers of regulations that go on with milk and ensuring that it is safe for consumption. So I think, just to make that blanket statement,
Hmm.
your milk is safe and it is antibiotic free. So just to speak to kind of those regulatory processes a little bit, antibiotic residue is strictly prohibited by the FDA, and they work really hard to ensure that. So on a conventional dairy farm, because organic farmers cannot use antibiotics, if they get to a point where their cattle need an antibiotic treatment, that cow needs to be removed from the organic herd. So on a conventional dairy farm, if a cow becomes sick to the point where it requires antibiotic intervention, generally that cow will be removed from the milking herd. They have a dairy vet on site that oversees the entire treatment. And while that cow is removed from the herd, she's typically placed in some sort of a hospital pen. And there's a lot of pros to, people get upset, oh, well, she's by herself. There's a lot of pros. If she's on her own, you're able to monitor her individually. She gets all her own feed, and then you get to monitor the antibiotic administration. So the whole time that she's getting that treatment, she's milked separately and the milk is held separately. So it does not go back into the total milking herd's milk. And that's to help limit, if she's on antibiotics, you don't want that milk going back into the milking herd. So she's milked separately. And then with each antibiotic, there's a withdrawal time. And this
Hmm.
is some amount of time that a cow needs to stay separate in order for the antibiotics to come out of her system. So, it varies per antibiotic. So that's why they have vets oversee that. But then once that cow has completed the antibiotic regimen, gone through the entire withdrawal period, which through that entirety, the whole time her milk is separate, held separately, go back into, the milk that's going to go to the store. Then she'll go back into the milking herd once she's been tested clear of antibiotics. So from there, that is like an example of on-farm antibiotic regulation. But then the FDA steps in because they, like I said, antibiotic residues are strictly prohibited. So when you have your entire milking herd milked and it goes into a big tank, the FDA comes onto the dairy and milk is tested on site for any antibiotic residue. And if any antibiotic residue is found at any point in the milk is dumped and the farmer is fined. And when the farmer is fined, we are talking a big fine. I mean, thousands of dollars. And so it is extremely, extremely important to dairy farmers that their cows are healthy, that they get, the treatment that they need, and that they step in when antibiotics are appropriate. But in general, antibiotics are not being tossed around willy-nilly. They're an expensive input for most dairy farms, and most of the times not necessary, but it is necessary for cow comfort and cow health. Then, so milk is tested on the farm, and then it's generally also tested at the processing plant, and it can be tested upwards of 9 times. And if at any point any antibiotic residue is found, the milk is dumped. So, I mean, this is a very, very, very popular milk myth. And I am a little surprised, to be honest, that it's still around because of how many regulations are in place that the proof is in the pudding to
Right.
me for this topic.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
organic and conventional are antibiotic free. And that is
Yep.
something consumers should know and feel pretty confident in.
Yeah, that's just one of those, if you see that on the label, it's sort of one of those, fear-based marketing things where just they do it for meat too. And it's like there's no antibiotics in your meat, there's no antibiotics in your dairy. So
Right.
as a consumer, you can just sort of, not really pay attention to something like that. As far as the added hormones go, can you kind of talk about that?
Sure. Yeah, so the hormones conversation can be kind of an interesting conversation. So milk comes from a living animal. If any of our food comes from anything that's had a life, plants and animals alike, they contain naturally occurring hormones. People get concerned about this, but our bodies, most hormones are proteins. They get into our body digests them, it spits them out, and studies have shown that this does not impact our bodies in the way that people are worried about. So when people talk about added hormones in regards to dairy production, they are typically talking about RBST, which was a synthetic hormone used back in the 1900s, late 1990s, and maybe even early into the 2000s. And what RBST is it is a synthetic version of a naturally occurring hormone. So bovine somatotropin, BST, is a naturally occurring hormone in dairy cows. And it helps with milk production and growth and maturation. And some of that naturally gets into the milk, but it is species specific. So not identified or not recognized by humans. So when we consume milk, our bodies don't really know what it is. They don't do anything with it. But people were really concerned about the synthetic form of BST, even though study after study after study showed no difference in milk from cows, not treated and cows treated with BST. And the purpose of using RBST was to help increase milk production. But it was proven safe by the FDA, but there was a lot of kickback from consumers, and it has been almost entirely phased out. So it still can be seen on the milk labels now, but almost no dairy farmers use it anymore. And, now because of better feed and better genetics and better cow care, they have higher milk production and phased out the RBST. So other than that, the added hormones are not really a cause for concern in the dairy industry and in your milk.
Right. Yeah. Another myth that I hear a lot too is that there's pus in milk. So can you address that?
I have to admit, this is my least favorite milk myth. And I've heard a milk myth, but this one just makes me cringe a little bit. No, there is pus in milk. I mean, to me, this really comes from a misunderstanding. People have long claimed, oh, there's pus cells in milk. But when they talk about pus cells don't exist. There is no such thing as a pus cell.
Right.
They are referring to white blood cells, somatic cells that are found in animals. So, when us humans or animals, when we get an infection, our body naturally increases white blood cells to help fight that infection off. And these white blood cells do go into the milk. They do. And that has nothing to do with the quality of the milk. That does not mean that just because they're there, that the milk is poor quality. It's a very natural, it's the same thing for human breast milk. I mean, you have cells and hormones. It came from a living being and it goes into, the milk.
Right. Yeah.
I think it's very important to clarify that is not pus. There is no pus in milk. And then, to that point, there is another test that goes on. Like I said, milk is extremely regulated. So one number that they look at is called SCC, your somatic cell count. So your somatic cells are those white blood cells that I talked about. And there is a maximum, and it varies by state and it varies by country, but there is a maximum level that your SCC cannot go over. And SCC really is just a depiction of your herd health. And so if it's too high, you generally, that's a sign that you may have an infection. And any milk that is too high over over the limit, it does not go into the food system. But farmers are also paid premiums to have lower SEC. So they are very well incentivized to keep their cows as healthy as possible. You know, and
Yeah, I think that's one thing too that people just don't logically think. I mean, it's like
yeah,
farmers want healthy animals. They're, you know, it's not like healthy animals produce, you know, good product. So yeah, I think that's just one thing people just don't really stop and think about. Like it's, you know, it's they benefit from their animals being healthy, obviously. So
they
yeah.
do. And, you know, I kind of going with this topic, going with this topic, a lot of people will bring up the topic of mastitis.
Hmm.
And this generally is something that's coupled with the topic of pus. And so, you know, women can get mastitis, cows can get mastitis. It's an infection that occurs, you know, in the udder of cows or in the breast of women.
Hmm.
It's extremely painful. And there may even be women now that are watching that have experienced it and they can speak to it.
Yeah.
So it's not common in cows, but it's something that can occur in cows. And
Right.
when this happens, the cow is similar to kind of the antibiotic conversation. The cow is removed and treated, and you know, it's something that the workers who work on the dairy and the people who, you know, manage the dairy, they keep an eye out every day. They see these cows every day, multiple times a day, and they are looking for signs of mastitis. And I actually got to talk to a dairy farmer, because if you read online, they make it seem like mastitis levels are just running rampant on dairy farms. And I got to speak to a dairy farm, and I said, you know, I'm just curious, how prevalent is mastitis? And it was half of 1%
Oh,
of all
wow.
experience mastitis
Yeah. Yeah.
at a given time. Generally, that's the number they give for their total milking population.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, it's not
A
this
half.
huge issue that everyone, yeah,
Oh,
kind of, and there is no pus in your milk. I just want to reiterate that.
go back to the question. Yes, there is. It's my least favorite milk myth. I think it's
Yeah.
gross, and it's grossly inaccurate, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Everyone
Yep.
can rest assured there
Yes.
is no milk. No.
So one question which I was surprised we got so many people asking, but was the connection between dairy and acne. I don't know if you know anything about this as a dietitian. I'm sure that's not really your specialty, but we
No.
had a ton of people asking about that. So
Yeah. So it's a very common question. And yes, I am not a dermatologist. So
yep.
if you are having issues with your skin or you're experiencing acne, you should see a dermatologist. But the food and acne link has been really, you know, it's been gaining a lot of focus from researchers, and not just dairy, foods in general, foods across the board. You know, we've always heard, oh, chocolate causes acne, but actually there has not really been a definitive link between any specific food and acne.
Okay.
There has Dairy falls into that category as well. One thing that has been shown about dairy is that it can increase oil production, which
Okay.
for may cause acne. So
Yep.
to me, and what I say as a dietitian, to me, your skin health is so individual. The American Academy of Dermatology recommends following a balanced diet, which a balanced diet includes dairy, but I think, you know, that is something that is going to be very individual to each person.
Right.
But
Yeah.
there's no like solid concrete evidence saying, oh yeah, dairy causes acne. It's just not
Right.
there.
Yep. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think it's just one of those
Yeah.
things sort of like inflammation that obviously there's no evidence really either way, but yeah, there's definitely no evidence showing that it specifically does.
No.
And I
Yeah.
think a lot of those you know, obviously I'm not an expert in that area either, but you know, a lot of times too, it's especially for women, it can be hormonal, and it's like, oh, like you kind of talked about the chocolate. It's like, oh, do you eat more chocolate, you know, during certain times of the month? And so you
Yeah.
associate it with the food when it really has to do with something else. So I
Yeah.
think that
Did you
needs
want
to be,
a pillowcase? Do you have dirt under?
yeah, right.
And that's
Yeah.
the skin is hard. You know, I get that question a lot, and it's just so individual. Like male or female, you know, it can depend on your hormone levels. It can depend on the time of the month. It can depend on
Right.
what detergent you're using.
Yeah.
And you had yogurt and you know, hadn't washed the pillowcase in a while, and now you're noticing a breakout on this side of your face. And yeah,
Right.
so tough. Skin is a really hard topic to cover. So that's why I always try to just go see an expert, you know.
Yeah.
But you may experience the result. So
right. Yeah. I'm just gonna look at some of the other questions that we had. I think so a lot of people say that it causes excess mucus. Can you kind of talk about that?
Yes. So this myth has been debunked for a very long time.
Okay.
So it was a very popular myth, and people still get questions. Like, I get questions all the time from like moms with sick kids, or moms whose kids get allergies, you know, or just people who get allergies in general, any adult. And yeah, so for a while, people thought that dairy caused an increased mucus production. And they've actually done a lot of studies that the feeling that you are producing more mucus is actually the mouth feel that milk creates. So milk, you know, is a very like thick substance. It's a very thick fluid, and it coats the inside of your mouth, making your saliva a lot thicker. And so when they've done studies on actual mucus production, the mucus production has remained the same, but people feel more because it's become more difficult to swallow.
Right.
You know, so many studies have shown that milk and dairy products do not cause an increase in mucus production. And I always say when I'm talking about this topic, I actually really like to recommend dairy products during times of sickness, because I feel like our appetite is very low, and products are such a concentrated source of nutrients for a pretty small amount of food. So, you know, if your kid is like really not feeling like eating, or if your appetite is really down in the dumps because you're not eating well, I always think that dairy actually makes a great option, and you can, you know, feel good, like, oh, I'm not kind of exacerbating these symptoms.
Right.
Dairy has not been shown.
Okay. Yeah, that was one that I wasn't sure. I always hear that too, and I'm like, I have no idea if that's true. So
it's a very
let's see what else. Oh, some people were wondering, so they were saying and obviously this is, you know, an anecdote, but like a lot of people say that they have issues digesting certain dairy products, but not other dairy products. Could that be due to the amount of lactose in different dairy products? Yes,
absolutely. Yeah. So, you know, and I kind of thought that this would be a good one for us to talk about, just the topic of lactose intolerance. And the nice thing about lactose intolerance is it does not, if you don't want to be, you don't need to go dairy free. And so a lot of times people will notice like, oh, I feel really bad if I just have a glass of milk for a snack, or I don't know what people eat. I have, you know, a yogurt parfait, and it absolutely has to do with the lactose content. So, you know, things like fermented dairy foods like yogurt or kefir tend to go over a lot better with people who struggle to digest lactose than just a big glass of milk. And that is because a lot of the bacteria in the yogurt actually break down that lactose content and make it easier for people to digest. Certain cheeses are easier for people. You know, so yeah, it absolutely varies by dairy product. They've also found that whole milk generally goes over better than non-fat milk, and that's because of the fat. It really helps slow down the digestion, and it keeps the lactose from kind of running straight through you. So yeah, it very much varies product by product. They've also found people do, you know, and this is extremely individual. So people, you know, people have to try what works for them. But oftentimes individuals do better with milk with a meal, just because, you know, similar to the whole milk concept, you know, if you've got other macronutrients down in there, it really helps slow down digestion. So yeah, absolutely is a thing, and it's extremely individual. Some products just go over a little bit better than others. And I think it's important that, you know, people kind of keep a log of what sits well and what did not work at all. That way they know they know what works for them.
Are there more, somebody had asked too, like it seems like they thought it seemed like there were more people that were lactose intolerant. Like, is it something that is more prevalent now, or is it not?
Uh, so dairy is known. I mean, lactose intolerance and a dairy allergy are not synonymous. So,
Hmm.
you know, step one, lactose intolerance is an issue with lactose, the milk sugar. And, you know, it's reported like 70% of the population reports issues with lactose. However, most of these people have not gone in and been formally diagnosed. So
Hmm.
the way that you diagnose is with a breath hydrogen test. You know, that is the official kind of gold standard for a lactose intolerance. But most people, they're like, oh, I kind of notice I'm a little bloated after my yogurt. I must have lactose intolerance. And so they do think in general that that percentage is maybe a little bit larger than people with an actual lactose intolerance. But I do
Hmm.
think lactose sensitivity is high.
Hmm.
And that's to be expected. Like I said, it does not mean you have to be dairy free.
Right.
You know, good for us. It may
Yep.
mean that you need to kind of tailor certain foods that you eat, or, you know, get a little strategic on when you eat them and what you eat them with.
Right.
But yeah, I would say that that percentage is probably higher than maybe the actual diagnosed population, but most
Hmm.
people diagnose themselves now. So
Right. Yeah. Can you kind of talk to, so if you are, I mean, so a lot of people, even if they can eat dairy, a lot of people just assume that, some of these other alternative milks are somehow healthier than dairy. I mean, I know for a period of time, I'm not lactose intolerant, but it does affect me sometimes. So it was a while ago, but I started drinking almond milk, and then I was like, wow, there's like nothing in this. It's just sort of
right.
like water. So, yeah, can you kind of touch on the different alternative milks and kind of how they, nutritionally, how they compare to dairy?
Sure. Yeah. And, you know, this will have to be a very broad
Yeah.
overview. There's
Yep.
so many alternatives. And,
Yeah.
you know, I think I do not, despite, you know, what I regularly talk about and everything, I do not think dairy is for everybody. And I know that alternatives absolutely have their place. However, the communication around alternatives has not been well delivered, because
Yeah.
like you said, I mean, I think I can't tell you how many times I have had patients there. I'll be going through a food log with them, and, you know, I'll ask them, oh, okay, and do you have any dairy? Oh, no, but I drink almond milk, so it's fine. And they don't realize there is a significant nutritional difference. They are not substitutes for one
Hmm.
another. So I think you know, if you're looking for it to be a nutrition substitute for milk, calcium fortified soy milk is the only recommended plant-based beverage to, you know, in comparison to milk. So they're
Yep.
the nutritionally similar. Soy is a source of complete plant protein. So, and it should be calcium fortified so that we can get the similar calcium content that's found in milk. But
Hmm.
other than that, I think plant-based beverages, you know, as we'll speak to almond milk, it's extremely low in calorie. It's extremely low in protein. It is fortified with nutrients, but a lot of times, if you are an almond milk drinker, those nutrients do sink to the bottom. So you really got to make sure you give your bottle a shake to try to mix those nutrients back into the beverage.
Hmm.
But I think, you know, they make a great addition to a smoothie if you're looking to bring down the calories, because in general, it's about almost 100 calories less than a glass of whole milk. So if you're really
Right.
trying to cut back on calories and you're a
Yep.
big drinker, I think almond milk can make a great addition to that. But when you're looking at a nutritional substitute for dairy milk, almond milk pales
Yeah.
in comparison. So, you know, as a dietitian, the one that I recommend is calcium fortified soy milk. And if people also, you know, soy sometimes can come up with questions of concern. You know, the
Yep.
other one I will recommend as an alternative to calcium fortified soy milk is like the pea protein.
Hmm.
It is in protein as well, but, you know, it is just really hard to mimic the nutrition that is found in a glass of milk.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of other foods like it, if any.
Yeah.
So I think everyone should know they are dairy alternatives. They are not equivalents.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
Message.
Yeah, I think a lot of those also come with that healthy halo. And
Yeah.
when you actually sort of look at the nutrition of it, it's like this really doesn't, there's really nothing in, much in there at all. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
I actually gave a presentation on this. So when I was in college, I gave a presentation on the differences, and it was simply educational differences between milk and almond milk. And I had a girl say to me, I had no clue that almond milk was not the same. I had
yeah.
no idea. And yeah, I think once you look at it, you're like, oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
they're just marketed like that, and people don't really take the time to look at it, and they're like, "Oh, it's healthier. I've heard it's healthier." And it's like I think a lot of people say it's healthier because
Yeah.
it's like lower in calorie, but like that doesn't necessarily mean it's healthier just because
Yeah.
there's like really nothing in it.
I
So,
saw
yeah.
on your, from the questions that were submitted,
Yeah.
why have alternatives taken off? Why are they so popular now? We
Hmm.
have so many options, so many choices. Some people like oat milk in their coffee,
Hmm.
and the research actually shows that majority of people, the vast majority of people who buy alternatives also buy milk. They tend to
Okay.
have, and so yeah, I think it has a health halo on it, and they're so popular. I mean, if you look at almost anybody on social media, I feel that they use an alternative.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
actually, the research shows that majority of people still buy both, and
Okay.
I think is great. I mean, we live where we have so much choice.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
For what
Yeah,
percentage
I think
buy?
a lot of times like the conversation too is like, either or like this one's better. And it's like, hey, if you like it and you also like dairy, like there's no harm in having both in your fridge and,
Right?
having one over the other sometimes. So yeah, I think a lot of times it's like, an either or conversation where it's like, well, why can't you have both? You know?
Yeah, exactly. I'm with that.
Just trying to look. I think some people have been asking questions. Whoops. Let's see. Maybe not. Um, oh, I think they're just more comments than questions, but I think we had more. I'm pretty sure we had more. We've covered a lot of them. Um, oh, I think one thing just so we talked about pasteurization. What is homogenization? And I know like that's sort of becoming popular again is non-homogenized milk. So if you can kind of talk
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, homogenization is really just, it basically makes all of the fat particles the same size. So it distributes them evenly throughout the milk. That's also what makes the milk kind of have that white color because the fat particles reflect light. And so homogenization really just helps keep the milk, like the fluid and the cream, from separating. Because that's the other thing that's always interesting is, people don't want it to look off. They want it to
Right.
look like milk. And so homogenization really just helps achieve that fluid look, and it evenly distributes the fat particles. It's been shown to help aid in digestion as well. You know, it to me, this kind of falls into the same topic about the raw milk, and
Yeah.
homogenization has been coupled with pasteurization for so long, and it's really to just evenly distribute the fat particles, and it's been shown to be easily digestible. So
Hmm.
I can't add too much more to that because
Yeah, as far as the like, how we were saying, obviously raw milk unpasteurized is unsafe. If you do like non-homogenized, does it come with any safety concerns like non-pasteurized would?
I would need to look into that. I
Yeah.
have not been asked a ton about the homogenization process. I know in general what it is, and but I don't want to speak too much to it until I've been able to read,
Yeah.
and kind of
Yeah,
see
I
what it.
don't think it come I would have to read more too, but I don't think it comes with extra safety concerns. So, and I think a lot of times when people want that like raw milk cream at the top, like they think they need to buy the non-pasteurized, whereas like you could just
Yeah.
buy the non-homogenized
Yes.
pasteurized, which would be
Yeah.
way safer than buying just raw milk. So
Yes.
I think
My
that's
big
like,
pasteurization and raw milk. You know, the
yeah,
homogenization, that's
right.
really just consumer, I guess, preference.
Yeah. Yeah,
But yeah, maybe
definitely.
circle back on that later
Yeah,
once I have a chance to look more into it. But
right.
I would, it doesn't change really the bacteria. You know, I bet
Right.
a big difference in digestibility.
Right.
Um,
Okay. Yep.
but yeah,
Okay. Let's see what
one
other
about milk and weight, correct? Was that
what's
one?
that?
Milk.
I don't know. I
I'm
just
trying.
had like jotted some down here, but yeah, if you remember one.
Yeah, I mean, I know that milk and weight is always a popular
Mm-hmm.
topic. And, you know, weight gain comes from calories in. So if
Right.
you are drinking tons and tons and tons and tons of milk a day, milk does contain calories. It's not water. So
Right.
you can add a lot of calories to your diet. But milk has actually been in a controlled diet, you know, in proper portions. Milk has been linked with weight maintenance and weight loss, and that is because of the nutrients that are in milk, you know, that help with satiety, such as the fat and the high quality protein. It also helps, you know, if you are trying to lose weight, dairy really helps out with that because it's lower in calorie if you choose a low fat or non-fat option, but still has the high quality protein. So as you lose your weight, you're not also losing your muscle by focusing on
Right.
protein, you know, and weight resistance exercise and things like that. So dairy as a whole has actually been linked with weight management. But like I said, you know, if you are drinking 8 glasses of whole milk a day, that will
Right.
stop. So I always recommend eating milk or drinking milk and eating yogurt and whatnot
Mm-hmm.
in a controlled diet. That's always the cornerstone of weight management.
Right.
You know, and people have been concerned with milk leading to an early onset of puberty, and this has also been shown to not be true. You know, puberty, I think for women occurs at an earlier age than maybe most people would think it would occur, but also compared to like the 1900s, we are in such a better nutritional status.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, there are, you know, childhood obesity is not is not rare in this country. And when your body gets to that size, and they don't know all the reasons and for why puberty may be decreasing as far as age goes, but
Mm-hmm.
milk has been shown to be the cause of that. It has been, you know, it's been attributed to possible weight of the child, the nutritional status of the child, you know, different
Mm-hmm.
options. Milk itself has not been shown and
Yeah,
shown.
that's another myth. I think people think
Yeah.
that the added hormones have to do with that, and that
Yes,
has nothing to do with it. Yeah.
it
Yeah.
doesn't.
Let me see. I'm just gonna scroll back up to the top to make sure I'm not missing any questions on here.
Can I scroll? Oh
I
yeah, I
think
can.
you can. Yeah. Um, someone said something about anti-caking agents, which I'm not sure what that has to do with.
Yeah,
Um,
but need to tackle that one.
um, let's see.
I see one is people with kids that would buy both milk and alternatives, and it varies. You know, it varies. It can be couples. One couple prefers, one spouse prefers, you know, an alternative. One prefers dairy milk. It can be moms like to drink smoothies with almond milk, but they like to drink milk throughout the day. So the answer to
Mhm.
that question, maybe the parents prefer an alternative, but they want to give their kids a full fat dairy option. So not limited to a specific family type, kind of just anybody, but I hope that answers that question. Can you drink raw goat's milk? I do not recommend drinking any raw. I have a connection issue. Oh, there you are. Can you hear?
Yeah, it's going in and
Oh,
out.
yeah, not yours.
I don't know. It could be mine. We're almost at the hour though, so I don't want
Yeah.
to get cut off. So we should probably wrap it up. Somebody early on had asked about UHT sterilized milk versus well, fresh milk, which would still be pasteurized, but it's basically just a different way of pasteurizing it and sterilizing it so that it's shelf stable. So, I mean, would you say that one certain way of pasteurization is better or worse than another way?
No, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't say so. You know, some you can find they tend to be a little bit more concentrated. So sometimes if they go through the UHT, the ultra high temp pasteurization, they'll have higher protein content. But all
Mm,
pasteurization is great. Pasteurization makes the milk safe to drink. So
right.
that kind
Yep.
of round up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think we covered most of the questions. So before it cuts us off, thanks again so much for coming on and
Or,
doing this. This was awesome.
yeah,
Hopefully everyone got their questions answered. Go follow Lauren it's at the Dairy Dietitian.
yeah,
And yeah, if you have any more questions after, for the people that can't watch this live, if you have any questions, just post them in the comments and we can answer them for you. So yeah, thanks again.
awesome. Thank you so much.
Yep. See ya.
Bye.